When you walk into a quiet village church, you don't expect to see something like this. This knight is from the late 15th century and is wearing something you don't see very often, a Yorkist livery collar. Now this tells you exactly where his loyalties were during the Wars of the Roses. Now he is very, very impressive, but it's not the reason we're here. Because underneath this effigy is something far older, and honestly, far more surprising. And it's survived here for over 1,000 years.
You really don't expect what's down here at all. It's like you've stepped out of the church and into another century.
What's underneath this church is incredible. A crypt built for the Anglo-Saxon kings of Mercia more than 1,000 years before the knight's effigy was carved, and it's where Mercia's rulers and saints were buried.
This was built in the 8th century, a complete Anglo-Saxon crypt underneath a village church. And there's nowhere else in England quite like this.
Repton Abbey originally stood on this site in the 7th century, and its baptistry was later converted into a mausoleum for the kings of Mercia. The Anglo-Saxon king Wiglaf was laid to rest here, but it's what happened to his murdered grandson Wigstan that would change this place forever.
Wigstan's remains were placed in the crypt, and people soon began reporting miracles occurring at his tomb, which drew the pilgrims to the abbey. By the time Wigstan was considered a saint, there were so many visitors to his tomb that an additional staircase had to be built to control the flow of visitors moving in and out of the crypt.
It's remarkable, isn't it? You don't expect to walk down the stairs in a parish church and find yourself in a place like this.
And the only reason we know about it is because in 1779, workmen who were digging a grave in the chancel floor above dug straight through the roof and fell into the crypt below. By the time the Viking Great Heathen Army arrived here in Repton, this was a royal burial site with its own saint, and the pilgrims that were flocking to the tomb of St Wigstan were bringing a lot of valuable items with them.
But in 873, the Great Heathen Army reached Repton, and what happened here wasn't a typical Viking raid, it was a takeover. The Vikings didn't choose Repton at random. This was the burial place of the kings of Mercia and a saint, and it was exactly what the Vikings wanted to destroy.
The archaeology shows that the Vikings took control of this entire site. They built defensive ditches around the abbey as part of their winter camp when they settled into Repton for good.
Just over this wall is something that's no longer visible above ground, but it's one of the most important discoveries in the story.
Back in the 1970s and 80s, archaeologists uncovered a 7th century Anglo-Saxon building in the vicarage garden, possibly a royal mausoleum.
And long before the Vikings arrived, it was being used as a burial chamber.
The mound that once covered it has long since disappeared, but what the archaeologists found inside the chamber is astonishing. They uncovered the remains of at least 264 people, men, women and children, and all placed inside an Anglo-Saxon mausoleum.
The radiocarbon dating places the bodies to the year the Great Heathen Army set up their winter camp at Repton. The Vikings were taking over the place of the Anglo-Saxon kings, and they were filling it with their own dead.
And right here, next to the crypt, archaeologists discovered something rare, the burial of a Viking warrior. He was tall, and his bones showed serious injuries from battle. He was buried with his sword, knife, and a Thor's hammer pendant around his neck. A younger man was buried next to him, likely his son or his brother, and on top of the grave, smashed up Anglo-Saxon stone crosses. It was a pagan burial covered with the remains of the abbey, which the Vikings had destroyed.
When the Vikings reached Repton, the monks abandoned the abbey and they took the bones of St Wigstan with them. The church was eventually rebuilt with the crypt sealed off and its existence fading from memory, until gravediggers accidentally fell through its roof over 1,000 years after it had been built.